Captain Marcus Kane pressed his face against the cold metal of the observation deck, watching the planet below disappear into what could only be described as, well, nothing. Just absolute, mind-bending darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. He'd seen a lot of weird stuff in his 15 years of military service, but this was new. So, let me get this straight, Kane muttered to his communications officer, Lieutenant Torres. An entire town just went dark? Not like a power outage dark, but like someone took a cosmic eraser to reality dark. Torres nodded grimly, her fingers dancing across the console. Millbrook, population 12,000. Been radio silent for 3 weeks now. Satellite imagery shows nothing but black void where the town used to be. Kane rubbed his stubbled jaw. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for High Command to finally decide this wasn't just some equipment malfunction. Typical bureaucratic response time, really. By the time they figured out something was genuinely wrong, half the planet could be gone. Any other settlements affected? Kane asked, though he already suspected the answer. None yet, sir. The darkness seems contained, like it's waiting for something. Waiting. That was the word that made Kane's skin crawl. In his experience, when mysterious alien phenomena started waiting, it usually meant they were planning something unpleasant for the human race. Down on the planet's surface, Dr. Rachel Voss crouched behind the twisted remains of what used to be a convenience store, her scientific instruments registering absolutely nothing where Millbrook should have been. The boundary between normal reality and the dark zone was so sharp you could literally step from daylight into pitch black in a single stride. This is fascinating, she whispered into her recorder, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. After all, 12,000 people were presumably dead or worse. But from a xenobiology perspective, this was the discovery of a lifetime that she'd been studying the phenomenon for 2 days now, ever since the military transport dropped her off at the edge of the exclusion zone. The darkness wasn't just an absence of light. It was an absence of everything. Sound, electromagnetic radiation, even her infrared sensors couldn't penetrate more than a few inches into the void. Day 2, log entry 7, she continued. The boundary appears stable. No expansion in the past 48 hours. Whatever's causing this seems to be maintaining a precise perimeter. Almost like a twig snapped behind her. Voss spun around, heart hammering, to find herself face to face with a man who looked like he'd been through hell and back. His clothes were torn, his hair matted with dirt and something that might have been blood. But his eyes held a wild kind of intelligence that made her instinctively step back. "You're not supposed to be here," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "They told everyone to stay away." "Who told everyone?" Voss asked, slowly reaching for the emergency beacon on her belt. "Who are you?" The man laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Name's Jimmy Kowalski. I used to live in Millbrook. Used to have a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage I complained about every month. Funny how perspective changes when your entire world gets eaten by shadows." Voss froze. "You were from inside the zone? How did you get out? Get out." Jimmy's laugh turned bitter. "Lady, I never left. The darkness, it doesn't just swallow places. It swallows time. I've been walking in circles for what feels like months, but according to my watch, it's only been 3 weeks." Meanwhile, aboard the orbital station, alien Ambassador Kreeth, 9 observed the human response with something approaching amusement. The humans were so predictably frantic when faced with the unknown. Their little military vessels buzzed around the planet like angry insects. Their scientists took endless readings of phenomena they couldn't begin to understand. Status report. Kreeth, 9, clicked to his subordinate, a younger member of the hegemony named Voss 12. "The humans have deployed standard reconnaissance patterns." Voss 12 replied, his mandibles clicking nervously. "They appear to be treating this as a potential threat rather than an opportunity." "Of course they are," Kreeth, 9, mused. "Humans always assume the worst. It's what makes them so entertaining." The truth was, the hegemony had been watching humanity for decades, waiting for the right moment to make contact. They needed to understand human nature, human resilience, human adaptability. And what better way to test a species than to present them with an impossible problem? The darkness wasn't destroying Millbrook. It was preserving it. Every person, every building, every blade of grass was perfectly suspended in a temporal stasis field. The hegemony's most advanced technology, designed to test how humans would respond to the seemingly impossible. Should we intervene if they attempt to breach the field? Voss, 12 asked Creeth. Nine's compound eyes glittered with interest. Let them try. I'm curious to see what creative solutions they will devise. Back on the surface, Jimmy Kowalski led Dr. Voss through the ruins of what used to be the town's outskirts. The man moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent weeks navigating terrain that seemed to shift and change when you weren't looking directly at it. The thing about the darkness, Jimmy explained, stepping carefully over debris that flickered in and out of existence, is that it's not really dark. It's more like reality taking a coffee break. You can walk through it, but everything gets loose, flexible. Voss frantically scribbled notes as they walked. Loose how? Are you talking about spatial distortion? Temporal displacement? I'm talking about waking up in your kitchen to find your refrigerator hanging from the ceiling and your cat speaking fluent German, Jimmy replied dryly. Though to be fair, Whiskers always seemed like he had something to say. They reached what Jimmy claimed was the town square, though Voss couldn't see anything but swirling darkness that seemed to move with purpose. Then Jimmy did something that made her scientific mind rebel against everything she thought she knew about physics, that he reached into the darkness and pulled out a street lamp. Not metaphorically. Literally grabbed the darkness like it was a curtain and pulled out a fully functioning street lamp, complete with the soft yellow glow that cut through the surrounding void like a warm knife through cosmic butter. How? Voss gasped. Jimmy shrugged. Practice. Turns out when reality gets this flexible, well, power becomes a pretty important survival skill. The darkness responds to intention. You just have to be really, really sure about what you want. That's impossible, Voss protested, even as she watched Jimmy casually rearrange space-time like he was redecorating his living room. Lady, 3 weeks ago, I would have agreed with you. But 3 weeks ago, I also thought my biggest problem was remembering to take out the trash on Tuesdays. Above them, Captain Kane was having his own crisis of understanding. His ship's sensors were picking up energy signatures that shouldn't exist, spatial distortions that violated about 17 different laws of physics, and worst of all, intermittent radio transmissions that seemed to be coming from inside the dark zone. Sir, Torres called out, her voice tight with confusion. I'm getting a transmission from a surface. It's from someone claiming to be inside Millbrook. Kane strode over to the communications console. Put it through. The voice that crackled through the speakers was tired but determined. This is former Millbrook resident Jimmy Kowalski to any military vessels in the area. I've got a scientist down here who's about to have a complete mental breakdown, and honestly, I could use some backup. Also, if anyone's got a good explanation for why my neighbor's house is currently existing in 17 different dimensions simultaneously, I'm all ears. Kane exchanged glances with Torres. Mr. Kowalski, this is Captain Kane aboard the UES Determination. Can you clarify your situation? Well, Captain, that's a loaded question. Short version? The darkness isn't what everyone thinks it is. It's not destroying anything. It's renovating. Reality renovation. And frankly, the contractor's doing a terrible job. Torres leaned over to whisper to Kane. Sir, should we trust this? Kane studied the readouts, showing impossible energy signatures and spatial distortions that seemed to be growing more stable by the hour. Torres, at this point, I'm willing to trust anyone who can explain why my instruments are telling me that part of the planet is currently existing in negative space. Fair point, sir. Dr. Voss, meanwhile, was experiencing what she would later describe as either the greatest scientific discovery in human history or the most elaborate practical joke ever played on a xenobiologist. Jimmy had somehow managed to create a small bubble of normal space-time around them, complete with breathable air and what appeared to be a functioning coffee shop. Want some coffee? Jimmy asked, gesturing to a counter that definitely hadn't been there a moment ago. I have been experimenting with quantum brewing techniques. Turns out when causality gets flexible, you can make really good espresso. Voss stared at the coffee shop, which was simultaneously a coffee shop, a library, and apparently a small aerospace engineering facility. This is breaking every law of physics I know. Yeah, well, maybe your laws of physics need updating, Jimmy replied, pouring 2 cups of coffee that smelled impossibly good. The way I see it, we have got 2 choices. We can sit here and debate the theoretical implications of impossible things happening, or we can figure out how to use this to save everyone who's stuck in temporal stasis. Temporal stasis. Voss nearly dropped her coffee. You know what's happening to everyone? Jimmy's expression grew serious. Lady, I have had 3 weeks to explore this place. The darkness isn't killing people. It's preserving them. Every person in Millbrook is perfectly fine, just paused. Like someone hit the cosmic pause button on 12,000 lives. But why? Who would do this? Jimmy looked up at the sky, where stars were visible despite the fact that they were supposedly underground in a coffee shop that existed in multiple dimensions. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Though I've got a theory, which is someone's testing us, seeing how we respond to the impossible. And honestly, Jimmy took a sip of his quantum coffee and smiled grimly. I think we are failing the test. Above them, in the void between stars, Ambassador Kreeth, 9 watched the human responses with growing interest. The individual known as Jimmy Kowalski was adapting to the stasis field's properties far more quickly than their models had predicted. The scientist was beginning to understand the true nature of what they were facing. And the military was preparing to do what humans always did when faced with the unknown. They were preparing to fight it. Fascinating, Kreeth, 9 clicked to his subordinate. The human capacity for adaptation continues to exceed our projections. Should we end the test? Voss, 12 asked. They are beginning to understand the true nature of the field. Not yet, Kreeth, 9 replied. Let's see how they respond when they realize they are not just being tested. They're being recruited. Because the truth was, the hegemony didn't just want to understand humans. They needed them. The galaxy was facing a threat that conventional military might couldn't handle. They needed species that could adapt, improvise, and find creative solutions to impossible problems. They needed humans who could look at a reality-warping darkness and figure out how to make coffee in it. The test was far from over. Captain Kane didn't like being played, and right now, he was pretty sure someone was playing humanity like a fiddle made of cosmic stupidity. The energy readings from the dark zone had shifted again, this time forming what his tactical officer swore looked like mathematical equations written in pure physics violations. Sir, Lieutenant Torres called from her station, voice tight with barely controlled panic. We're getting multiple contacts. Ships decloaking around the planet. Kane's blood went cold. How many? 17 vessels, sir. Configuration unknown. They're just sitting there, watching. Through the bridge's main screen, Kane could see them now. Sleek, organic-looking ships that seemed to bend light around them like cosmic mirages. They weren't threatening, exactly. They were just present, like cosmic vultures waiting to see how the show would end. Open a channel, Kane ordered. To which ships are all of them. If they want to watch humans deal with impossible situations, they can damn well introduce themselves properly. Down on the surface, Jimmy Kowalski was teaching Dr. Voss how to navigate what he'd started calling liquid reality. The trick, he explained, was to stop thinking about what was possible and start focusing on what was necessary. See that building over there that's simultaneously a grocery store and a particle accelerator. Jimmy pointed to a structure that hurt Voss's eyes to look at directly. That used to be Miller's hardware store. But Mrs. Patterson really needed groceries, and Professor Hendricks from the university really needed to finish his research. So the darkness gave them both what they needed. Voss pulled out her instruments, trying to record readings that kept changing faster than her equipment could process. You're saying the field responds to human need? Not just responds to it. It anticipates it, like it's learning from us. Jimmy's expression grew thoughtful. 3 weeks ago, I needed to find my family. The darkness showed me they were safe, just paused. Yesterday, I needed to understand what was happening to us. Today, you showed up with questions I needed answered. That's not how temporal stasis works, Voss protested, though her voice lacked conviction. That's not how anything works. Lady, nothing about this works according to any science textbook ever written. But it works according to human need, human will, human stubborn refusal to accept that impossible means impossible. A new voice cut through their conversation. That's exactly what we were hoping you'd say. Both humans spun around to find themselves facing something that definitely wasn't human. The being stood about 7 feet tall, with smooth, blue-gray skin and 4 arms that moved with liquid grace. Its face was almost human, but the eyes held an ancient intelligence that made both Jimmy and Voss instinctively step closer together. My name is Ambassador Kreeth, 9 of the Galactic hegemony, the alien said, its voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't have been possible with humanoid vocal cords. And congratulations, humans. You have passed the first phase of your evaluation. Jimmy looked at the alien, then at Voss, then back at the alien. Evaluation? You mean this whole thing was a test? A test, an interview, and a recruitment drive all rolled into one, Kreeth 9 confirmed. We needed to understand human adaptability under impossible circumstances. Most species, when faced with reality-warping technology, either panic completely or attempt to destroy it. Humans appear to make coffee in it. You put 12,000 people in temporal stasis to see if we'd make coffee. Voss's voice climbed several octaves. We put 12,000 people in temporal stasis to see if you'd find creative solutions, unsolvable problems. The coffee was an unexpected bonus. Jimmy crossed his arms. And what happens now? Do we get a gold star and a pat on the head for being such good little test subjects? Kreeth 9's expression shifted into what might have been amusement. Now we offer you a job. Up in orbit, Captain Kane was having what he'd later describe as the most surreal military briefing of his career. The alien ships had responded to his communication request by transporting him and his senior staff directly to their flagship, where he now sat across from beings that looked like they'd stepped out of every science fiction movie ever made. Let me see if I understand this correctly, Kane said, rubbing his temples where a headache was beginning to build. You have been watching humanity for decades. You decided we showed promise. So you created an impossible situation to test our problem-solving abilities. And now you want to recruit us for some kind of galactic police force. The alien commander, who'd introduced herself as Strategic Coordinator Vash 7, nodded with her entire upper body. The galaxy faces threats that cannot be defeated through conventional warfare. We need species that can adapt, improvise, and find solutions where none should exist. Humans excel at this. What kind of threats? Kane asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. Vash 7 gestured, and the air in front of them shimmered into a 3-dimensional display showing what looked like empty space slowly consuming stars. Reality parasites. Entities that feed on the fundamental forces that hold the universe together. They cannot be fought with weapons or negotiated with through diplomacy. They can only be outthought. Kane stared at the display. And you think humans can outthink cosmic parasites that eat reality? We think humans can do the impossible when properly motivated. Your species has a remarkable talent for refusing to accept that something cannot be done. Lieutenant Torres, who'd been silent up to this point, cleared her throat. What about the people in Millbrook? When do they get unfrozen? As soon as Captain Kane gives us his answer, Vash 7 replied. Accept our offer of alliance, and they wake up with no memory of the stasis period. Refuse and Kane's voice carried the quiet menace of a career military officer who'd just been threatened. And they wake up anyway, Vash 7 said, surprising everyone in the room. We are not monsters, Captain. We don't hold innocent lives hostage. But we are desperate. The reality parasites are spreading faster than our projections indicated. We need human creativity in our fight against them. Back on the surface, Jimmy Kowalski was having his own recruitment conversation with Ambassador Kreeth 9. The alien had explained the situation with the reality parasites, the galactic threat, and humanity's unique potential to combat entities that existed outside normal physics. So let me get this straight, Jimmy said, pacing back and forth in his impossible coffee shop. You want me to leave my family, my home, my entire life to go fight cosmic horror stories in space. We want you to save your family, your home, and your entire species from extinction, Creeth 9 corrected. The reality parasites are heading toward this sector of the galaxy. Earth has perhaps 5 years before they arrive. Dr. Voss looked up from her notes. 5 years? That's not nearly enough time to evacuate the planet, which is why we need to stop them, Creeth 9 said simply. And humans appear to be uniquely qualified for the task. Because we are stubborn. Jimmy asked, because you refuse to acknowledge limitations. Most species, when told something is impossible, accept it. Humans hear impossible and interpret it as challenge accepted. Jimmy laughed despite himself. You know what? You're not wrong about that. But I have got one condition, which is my family comes with me. All of them. I'm not leaving them behind to maybe get eaten by cosmic monsters while I'm off playing Space Hero. Creeth 9's forearms moved in what might have been a shrug. That can be arranged. We will need human support staff anyway. Humans who can maintain your unique perspective while adapting to galactic technology. Dr. Voss raised her hand tentatively. What about the scientific applications? The research potential? Unlimited, Creeth 9 assured her. You will have access to technologies and phenomena that human science hasn't even theorized yet. The stasis field that preserved Millbrook is considered primitive by galactic standards. Meanwhile, Captain Kane was making the kind of decision that would either save humanity or doom it entirely. The alien coordinator had shown him star charts indicating the reality parasite's approach vector, tactical analyses that made depressing reading, and casualty projections that suggested the total extinction of all intelligent life in the galaxy within 50 years. You are asking me to commit my entire species to a war we don't understand against enemies we can't comprehend, Kane said finally. We are asking you to be yourselves, Vash 7 replied. Stubborn, adaptable, and too stupid to know when you are beaten. Kane considered this for a long moment. Then he started laughing. Not the polite chuckle of diplomatic conversation, but the deep, genuine laughter of a man who just realized the cosmic joke being played on everyone. You know what the really funny thing is? Kane said when he could breathe again. This is exactly the kind of impossible situation that humans are dumb enough to think we can solve, which means you are probably right about us. Is that a yes, Captain? Kane looked around at his senior staff, all of whom were nodding with the grim determination of people who'd signed up to protect humanity and meant to follow through on that promise, no matter how weird things got. That's a yes, Coordinator. Humanity accepts your offer of alliance. But we do this our way, which means we save everyone we can, we fight as hard as we have to, and we absolutely refuse to accept that anything is impossible. Even cosmic parasites that eat reality. Vash 7's expression shifted into what was definitely amusement now. I was hoping you'd say that. 3 hours later, the darkness around Millbrook began to fade. Not all at once, but gradually, like dawn breaking after the longest night in human history. The 12,000 residents of the town woke up in their beds, at their jobs, in their cars, with nothing more than a vague sense that they'd had very strange dreams. Jimmy Kowalski stood in his actual living room, not the impossible coffee shop he'd grown used to, and hugged his wife and children like he'd never let them go again. Dr. Voss packed her instruments and prepared for the research opportunity of several lifetimes. Captain Kane looked down at the planet where a town had just been returned to normal reality and wondered what other impossible things humans would be called upon to accomplish. Ambassador Creeth 9 transmitted his report to the Hegemony Council with something approaching satisfaction. The humans had passed every test with flying colors. They'd adapted to impossible circumstances, found creative solutions to unsolvable problems, and agreed to help fight an enemy that terrified species with millions of years more advanced technology. But most importantly, they'd done it all while maintaining their essential humanity. Their stubborn refusal to accept defeat, their ability to find hope in hopeless situations, and their tendency to make coffee when faced with cosmic horror. The galaxy was about to learn what humans really meant when they said challenge accepted. The reality parasites were in for one hell of a surprise, because there's one thing you should never do when dealing with humans. Give them an impossible problem and assume they will have the good sense to give up. They won't give up. They will make coffee crack jokes, and figure out a way to save everyone, even if it requires rewriting the laws of physics to do it. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly what the universe needs. The darkness was gone. The real fight was about to begin, and humanity was finally ready for the stars.